Hi BookTube, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie and it's time for my bi-monthly wrap-up. Sorry it's so late uploading, but I've been working every day this past week and so I didn't really get to film it. And I was hoping to squeeze in at least 2 more books. But anyway, between the 2 months, I read 20 books altogether. I read 10 books each month. And it was interesting because, like, August was very non-fiction centric month. And for the first time, I actually participated in Jane Austen July. I had been wanting to do that for a long time, but every time I thought about doing it, I would get distracted by some of the other books I was reading that weren't Jane Austen related. So I finally did it this year, and I feel like it was a good reading year as far as quality goes. I feel very satisfied with my work, and I really hope I don't lose momentum with the nonfiction because I want to participate, as always, in Nonfiction November. And nonfiction's not always the easiest to get into, I feel like, because, you know, unless you're really passionate about the subject matter, you might not be as inspired. And I think I feel like I sometimes, in the back of my mind, associate it with, like, textbooks and stuff. Or at least I used to, not as much anymore. But, anyway, so let's get started. First, I will talk about Jane Austen July, then I'll talk about the other books I read in July. And then I will talk about my nonfiction and the fiction I read in August. Okay, so let's get started. So, these are my Jane Austen July books. So, first, I did participate in one of the group reads. There were 2 books they were reading this year. They were reading Lady Susan, which, as I've said before, my copy of Lady Susan is in the big Barnes & Noble leather bound of her 6 main novels. 6 or 7 main novels. And I didn't want to be carrying that around with me because then that would limit how much I would get read. And then, you know, my schedule may be more sporadic than some people. It's still, like, it can still be I can still get pretty busy, you know, like, I don't have a set schedule, and then we went to visit my sister in July, and I was not going to take that with me, so, I would rather have a separate copy of Lady Susan, if I bought it, like. But I did really enjoy rereading Pride and Prejudice. It's been the first time I've ever actually reread it. I read it years ago when I borrowed my sister's copy of the book. But the closest I've come to rereading it until now was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Seth Graham Greene. It is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but except for the main characters are zombie slayers. But it basically, you know, it's the same story, you know, word for word. It's just had the added scenes of zombies and talking about zombies and battle scenes with zombies, and so. But anyway, in case you're one of those people that does not know, this is kind of the first hate to love story. Well, not the first, but one of the original. You have Elizabeth Bennet is the second daughter of a family of 5 daughters, and of course during this time, girls couldn't inherit their parents' money, so their dad, Mr. Bennet, would have to pass down the money to the next male relative, and now in this case is Mr. Collin, who's a clergyman. So Miss Bennet has to get her daughters married off to rich men. So they will be taken care of and they won't be living out on the streets. And of course Jane is the oldest, so she has to marry her off first. And they find out that a Mr. Bingley, Charles Bingley, has come to town. And his sister Caroline and his other sister Miss Hurst, who obviously is married, are coming with him, along with a Mr. Darcy, who is Bingley's best friend. And at their first ball, where they meet him, Jane and Bingley hit it off quite nicely. They're smitten with each other. But Darcy's a little standoffish. he mostly talks to the Bingleys, and he doesn't make the best impression on anyone, especially not Elizabeth. And then later, she ends up hearing from a Mr. George Wickham, who's one of the visiting soldiers, whom her sister Kitty, Lydia fancies. That even worse about Darcy, because it turns out that he and Wickham grew up together, and Wickham's father was Darcy's house caretaker, and that apparently he claims that Darcy prevented him from getting his inheritance from the elder Mr. Darcy. So it does not make him look good in front of Elizabeth, but funnily enough, Darcy's actually kind of drawn to Elizabeth. Against his better judgment, as he puts it. And it was so fun rereading this story, the little romance, and listening to the witty back and forth repartee between Elizabeth and Darcy, and her calling him out on his BS, and just, it was so fun. I love, Jane Austen's writing style. It's so comforting and poetic, and she, I love how her books are all like a social commentary on the world she was part of. I love all the secondary characters, Miss Bennet. She can get annoying, but she was, you kind of understand her on some level. Like, she has to get her daughters married off, but she's a little, not the brightest bulb all the time, and she can be a little pushy. And, I still like Mr. Bennet, but, as I've heard, heard people talk about this before I reread it and having reread it again, Mr. Bennet is not that great of a guy. I mean, you see things from Elizabeth's perspective, so they have a strong bond. Elizabeth's his favorite. They have a great bond. He's very well-read, very quick-witted, too, and just very snarky, and you kind of feel bad for him a little bit with how, how pushy and overbearing Miss Bennet can be. But then, if you think about it, first of all, you learn that he married, I'm trying to remember if it actually said it in here or in the Pride and Prejudice retelling I read this year, but, which I will talk about in a little bit, that he only married Miss Bennet because she was beautiful and, and charming, and then he realized after they were married that actually she's not my intellectual equal, and he gets kind of bored with her, and he just ignores her. And he's kind of dismissive of his other daughters, except for Elizabeth. I mean, I don't know if he's as dismissive of Jane, but, and so he's quick-witted and everything, and lovable at times, but he's also kind of a jerk to the rest of his family. And actually, I know this is blasphemous, but Darcy's not my favorite Austen guy. I mean, I like him, but he's actually not my favorite of the Austen men. It's just, and Mr. Collins is very amusing and funny, and you kind of feel bad for the guy almost. In the retelling, there's a light shined upon him, and, he gets more attention as a character, and you kind of understand him a lot more in the retelling I read. And it was just great to reread this and be back in this world, in Miss Austen's world, particularly in Pride and Prejudice, the world of Pride and Prejudice. And watch this couple grow as individuals and as a couple. And I did watch the 2005 because it's the only copy, because I've not watched the infamous 1995 was the one with Colin Firth. The one with the infamous fountain scene. I have not watched that one ever, and like I said, I've been meaning to. I keep saying I will, and I never get around to finding it, searching for it. So if it's not on Netflix, then I'm probably not gonna. I might not get around to it. But so here is the retelling. Janice Hadlow's the other Bennett sister. And I did do a review of this one, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But this was Pride and Prejudice through Mary Bennett's eyes, the invisible middle sister. The first part is the Pride and Prejudice storyline, but then part 2 is 2 years after the Pride and Prejudice storyline. And she tries to adjust to her new situation, and it's not an easy adjustment. She's kind of stuck with her mom, who's constantly belittling her and making her feel bad about herself. She tries to go with her mom to live with Jane. That doesn't work out. It made it worse by Caroline Bingley picking on her because she can't pick on Elizabeth anymore. She tries to live with, Elizabeth. That goes good at first, but then she ends up being just an extra third wheel or fifth wheel in the family, and or fourth wheel, I guess, in the family. And then she goes to London and lives with the Gardners. Oh, well, actually, before that, she lives with the Collinses, but that doesn't go well. And then she lives with the Gardners. And part 3 is her time in London and meeting her future husband. And it was just so great seeing Mary Bennett shine, and I really connected to her character. Because I feel like I never fully related to Elizabeth. I'm definitely not as quick-witted and clever as she is. At least I don't think so. Maybe other people would say differently. I don't know. But I feel like Mary was the one I related to most. I was very shy growing up. And still probably am a little bit well-read. Awkward. Saying the wrong things sometimes. But I love that Mary got to shine in this book. And we got to learn more about her character with just the little bit of information. We're given. The original PMP is expanded upon in this book. And characters like the Collinses and the Gardners get a lot more attention too. I like the romance. I think it was really sweet. There is a love triangle just like PMP had. I also like that it was a coming of age story for Mary. Was watching her not just shine, but growing up and figure out her identity, who she is, and what she wants out of life. Now it does get slow, and some of the stuff probably could have been cut out by Hadlow that she put in there. It's a bit of a long book. Although the chapters are short, but I had a good time with this. It's one of my favorites now, and I definitely recommend it. It's a great compliment, I think, to Pride and Prejudice, next to Longbourn. And, like I said, I did a separate review, so please check out that review to fully decide. Okay, so, before we left for my sisters, I did start reading this one, but I didn't finish it until the end of the month, towards the end, and that's Jane Austen, Her Life and Letters. And books don't make me cry. They may make me angry, but they don't make me cry. I do better when I get the actors playing the characters, and maybe with the sad music and stuff like that. So, like, that's what gets me emotional, the visuals. Well, I actually ended up crying. Like, the last letter that Cassandra Austen wrote to Jane's niece, I cannot remember which one, after she died, which is not a spoiler, it just broke my heart. Some of the things she says about her sister just made me cry so much. I love her relationship with Cassandra. It's so sweet and endearing, and, she's the one that Jane wrote to the most. So it's sort of like a memoir, like a biography, but it also has bits and pieces of letters, because of course Cassandra burned most of them to protect her sister's reputation and honor. She burned a lot of the letters, but there are some still remaining, and they are found in this book. And there's also sections of the book with each of the books being published and what was going on at the time, and her struggles with publishing those books. Like Northanger Abbey, she tried to publish that first, and that got rejected. And then it didn't come out until after her death. I cannot say, there's a word for that, but I cannot pronounce it for some reason. I always get tongue-tied. Posthumously? Well, actually, that was a little close. Posthumously? One of my better times at saying that word. But I really like, because we really, through these letters, we really get Jane's voice with these letters. And it was just so great reading her letters, and hearing how sassy and snarky she is. Now, she can be kind of mean. But in, in a, like, charming kind of way that's endearing. I mean, probably not to the people that she would be talking about, but... And it was just, I enjoyed this first nonfiction about Jane Austen, and I definitely recommend it, especially because, like I said, it has her letters in it. So then, that was actually the last book I read, because I read this one on my way home from my sister's. And that is, although I might have still finished that first and then finish this, Northanger Abbey, which, other than Lady Susan, I have not read Northanger Abbey or her Juvenilia. But, so, in case you don't know, this is the story of Catherine Morland. She is obsessed with Gothic literature. She's probably, I think, from what I've heard, I think she is the youngest of Jane Austen's heroines. And, she is invited to join her parents' friends, the Allens, in Bath, to visit and to maybe come out in society a little bit more. And she runs into her old friend, Isabel Thorpe, and they hang out. And Isabel's brother, which either it's James or John. I always get Catherine and Isabel's brother's names mixed up. I cannot remember which one is which. But, I think it's John. John is, and I think James is Catherine's brother. So John, she introduces her to John Thorpe, who really likes Catherine and believes that she's a little richer than her family is richer than they really are, and so he's really interested in marrying her, but she's not interested in him. And Isabella is interested in James, Catherine's brother, who really is the only other member of Catherine's family that we really get to know. The other characters, the rest of her family, aren't really in it. I mean, they're in the first couple chapters, but we don't get them after. We just get James, which is fine. I liked his character. Nothing wrong with his character, but I wish we had got more of her family. And she ends up crossing paths with Henry Tilney and is immediately smitten with him. He is charming. They have a good conversation. They really like each other. And she is smitten with him, and she wants to hang out with him and his sister Eleanor, who Henry tells Catherine all about. And every time she tries to meet with them and hang out, Isabella's brother, John, interferes and thwarts her and tries to deviate her from hanging out with him. But then he takes it a little too far, and it kind of comes between her and Isabella, and she's finally able to hang out with the Tilneys. And it turns out that General Tilney decides to invite Catherine, because he has found out that he has also believes that she led to believe that she is very rich, to Northanger Abbey, their home, and Catherine is ecstatic. First of all, she thinks that this is a real, that this place, they may have some dark secrets, it's an abbey. She's excited. She also gets to hang out with Henry and his sister Eleanor. So she goes, and while she's exploring the house, she realizes that it doesn't have as many dark secrets as she hoped, but General Tilney has made an intimidating impression on her, and she is starting to suspect that he might have something to do with with Henry's mother's death. So, first of all, this was not long enough, in my opinion. That's one of the downsides. The characters were very likable, although I wanted to know more about the Thorpes. And like I said, I wish there was more on her family, on Catherine Morland's family. And the couple, they were likable, and I think, Henry would make a great husband. You know, and I think Catherine is very relatable as a character. I think a lot of readers can relate to letting your imagination get carried away with you. And I really, and like I said, Henry Selden, he's very likable, he's charming, he's definitely, boyfriend material, but I feel like they were kind of not super special couple. I didn't fall in love with this couple. Like I said, I kind of want to know more about some of the other characters, like Thorpe's. And I kind of feel sorry for Isabella, because I think you can kind of understand her motives. I mean, she has to marry someone of wealth. But then she ruins that for me later. But, there was a point where she writes a letter to Catherine that does seem genuine to an extent, but, and I don't blame Catherine for thinking that their home, Northanger Abbey, might have some secrets. Now, Eleanor also seems, in some places, Eleanor has a romance, but I feel like we didn't really get enough of that. Like, I'm curious to know what if Jane hadn't died so soon, I would have loved to see what she could have done with Northanger Abbey, if she could have expanded on it. Because it wasn't, like I said, it was published after her death. So I wonder if she ever had any ideas to expand it and add more to the story. Because I would have liked that. And that it was still really good, very entertaining. I just wish it had more. So that is my Jane Austen July. Now let's talk about what else I've read. So I only have, other than those, I only have 2 other physical books for July to show you, and the rest of them are audiobooks. So that was another thing. I listened to some audiobooks in July. First is the first book in the Dark Shore series by booktuber Elliot Brooks. This was so great and so fun. A great start to a series. There's elemental magic. There's magical objects that these people are meant to protect. There's a war going on, like we are in a world in peacetime in these kingdoms, but then the other kingdoms are like, you're doing a bad job. We want more to happen. We're done with this supposed peacetime. I liked Prince Dietrich. He really loved his mother. He was, searching for the magical dagger that, to save her because it could make her immortal, and she was ill. And, oh my god, I love his relationships here. The dragon, that was really sweet. I love, I'm one of the many people who loves the idea of animal companion, especially ones that can talk. There's, like I said, elemental magic. And now, it was a little slow in the beginning, introducing the characters and having you get to know them. But I also like the added touch of Elliot Brooks. She's a sketch artist. She does that as a hobby, I believe. And so throughout the chapters, there are sketches that she made of each of the characters, which I think is a nice touch. See if I can find one. And there's also pictures of like maps and stuff of the kingdoms. And other images, and let's see if I'm trying to find one. I don't know, but she does these great sketches in this book. Now, she didn't do her cover. Someone else, I think Jay from Caption and Words, did this cover, which is so beautiful. I really love this cover. I don't know when book 2 will be coming out. I know that Elliot Brooks was dealing with a lot of personal issues right before, right around the time. I don't know if it was right before or right around the time that COVID happened. And I think she's, in a decent place right now. I don't know if she's working on it, but I am eager for book 2. But whatever happens, you know, I'm just want it to be good. I'm just hoping it will be good. And I want her to take, if she needs to take her time for it to be good, then I'm all for that. But this was really fun, and I had a good time. Okay. So then I read The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. I don't think the characters consider those pirates necessarily, but this feels like very much a pirate book. So in this world, they have ships that are made out of dragon bones. And they have these black ships where criminals go. And people who commit crimes. So our main character, Jordan Twinner, was sent there because he committed a murder. And so he's the captain of the ship, and he's not very great at it. And then, but, you know, he's actually having fun, and, you know. And, so sometime later, though, he gets replaced by this woman named Mia Gilburn, whose mother kind of runs the island where these ships go, because she committed treason. And, so now she's captain, and she is much better at being a captain than he is. She's earned the respect of the crew. She's good at disciplining them. She knows her stuff, and making Jordan look bad, and he is pissed. He does not like this woman taking his place, and hopes to eventually cooperate with her so that eventually he can get his job back. Meanwhile, she's told by a friend that they must go hunt down a sea dragon who has just appeared. And these sea dragons have not been seen in centuries. And of course, if anyone else finds out about any of the other people that these bone ships, find out that everybody will be hunting down this sea dragon, and she has to get to him first and capture it and bring it to this other guy. So this was just so much fun. For a first book, it was really exciting. It took me some time to get into it first. I admit that, but I really had a good time. I like Joran. He's a very relatable character, I think. You know, he does grow and learn throughout the story. And, you know, at first I was kind of shipping him with Miaz, but then I was like, you know, I actually rather them be friends. I like them better as friends. I think that would be really great to see that friendship grow and blossom, and they learn to respect each other and rely on each other. Instead of, like, it doesn't have to be romantic to be to be a good partnership. There is a lot of word, they don't use traditional, R.J. Barker does not use traditional nautical terms, as far as I can tell. But there is a bit of a glossary in the back with all the definitions of those words. Like a captain, I think, is called shipwife. Let me go ahead and look at the. And Joran becomes the deck keeper, their second in command to the shipwife, and then we have the deck holder, who's third officer, stuff like that. So, deck mother in charge of the discipline. So it was a little bit challenging with all these new words, but I was still able to be engaged in the story. And like I said, if I wanted to, I could refer back to the glossary. But yeah, it was really fun reading this. Okay, so next, let's see. Okay, next is where I started listening to the audiobook. So I was interested. Now, back in June, I had listened to the Ahsoka novel, on audiobook. So I decided to see what other Star Wars audiobooks that were available on Libby. And I found the Thrawn Trilogy, which I still have not listened to the last one. I will soon. And this is about a character who's a very Sherlockian type of character. in my opinion. He is this blue alien dude who's very intelligent. He's very clever and, really studies people and observes them and begins to understand them. And he's discovered by the Empire's military. And he ends up being, has an ally in I don't know if it's Vanto or Vanto. This small town young man who wants to, succeed and rise up in the ranks, but he's not overly ambitious though. And he turns out he understands the alien languages, so he is Thrawn's translator. And he's not too keen about this because he kind of ends up being stuck with Thrawn for a long time. And Thrawn moves up in the ranks because he is really good at this military stuff. And while the second one is when he comes across Anakin and then later Darth Vader. In the past storyline, Padme's on this mission and she's going to this factory and then she ends up getting held hostage there. So Anakin and Thrawn are going to save her, and they, of course, don't agree on everything. And Thrawn is all about the mission, but for Anakin, this is very personal. But he cannot reveal that to Thrawn. Although Thrawn has suspicions, if I think. Meanwhile, in the present-day storyline, Thrawn and Darth Vader are kind of in competition for the Emperor's favor. And I cannot remember, at least, it's been a long time. It's been a few weeks now, so I don't remember what they were doing. But I think they were going to the same place where the factory was in the past storyline. Both of them were really fun. I like how the Star Wars audiobooks have the sound effects. The narrator is really great. I definitely felt like I was watching a Star Wars movie without the visual of the movie. Like, with all the sound effects, and the character doing different voices for different characters. I mean, there's still going to be a sense of similarity because, of course, it's one man doing all the voices. I really like seeing the contrasting personalities between the other characters and Thrawn in both books. It was very like you had, Vanto is a little more simple, a little more small-minded. He's not, he's not completely ignorant, but he's more of a small town minded. And he's just a nice guy, And then you have Anakin / Vader, who has a bit of a temper, very passionate. It's his way or the highway. He wants to get things done a certain way, and just seeing the clashy personalities, like I said, in both stories was really interesting. And I like seeing how in book 2, Padme got to do some action. She got to do some fighting. We got to see her going on a mission. We do get that in the Clone Wars series as well. I haven't finished that one. I need to get back to it soon. So it was really fun to see Padme. And also, it makes it more interesting when I'm listening to a story that's military fantasy sometimes, or military sci-fi in this case. Like, I prefer the fantasy and science fiction version of that kind of stuff, those types of stories. And yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed that, and I will listen to this third one soon. Okay, so after that, it was, Sanctius, which is very much by Simon Toyne, which is basically, it's like, Da Vinci Code, Angels, Demons type story. So there's this made-up religious order who is protecting the secret of the Holy Grail, and the story starts out with this young man named Samuel. He is a monk in the order, and he has been given the secret. The secret has been revealed to him, and the story starts with him being ashamed and upset about this whole thing. And he's like, "Where is God in all this?" And he is shocked and disgusted, and this is just too much for him. So he leaves to climb up this mountain, and before he commits suicide, he ends up standing like like a kind of makes like a similar to the cross, the Christian cross, except for the cross part is farther up. And it makes national news. It gets everybody's the public of this country's attention. The monks are freaking out because the last thing they want is the secret of the Holy Grail to get out. So they have to find out everything they can about the Samuel guy, and they have to go, and when he commits suicide, they're like, you know, the main guy in charge of this order is like, we have to get his body and get rid of it. And if he has any family, we have to, you know, get rid of his family. And it turns out he has a sister. And so they're trying to hunt her. She is called by the police. She's told by the police what happened. So she, of course, this is her brother, who she hasn't seen in years. She decides to show up to this country. I cannot remember what country it was at the moment. Like, I think it was an Eastern European country. She decides to check things out because she hasn't seen her brother in years. But, you know, this is still her brother. And meanwhile, the rivals of the order, the people who believe in this prophecy about what Samuel did, the cross will fall and the cross will rise. That's part of the prophecy. They know that his sister will be in danger, so they try to find her. And it's like a thriller, a religious thriller. It's exciting. It's fast-paced. It was kind of fun. This is like eating chocolate, where it's fun. It's not very in-depth. And it's just, like I said, like Angels and Demons, where it's all these theories in it, you know, and it's just, it was just fun. It was really cool. It's not the best piece of literature, but I still really had a good time with it. I might have liked it even better than Angels and Demons and Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. And I feel like it was less sexist, it focused less on the sexist aspect. I mean, it wasn't sexist like Dan Brown's books are. Like, it didn't focus, you know, although, you know, our main character did, you know, was interested in one of the male characters, you know, that was helping her, and the other group of people who believed in prophecy, so it's kind of like, I kind of roll my eyes at that. It's like, oh, of course. And, you know, every so often she thinks about how good looking the guy is, and it's just like, really? But anyway, like I said, it was just fun. You know, I mean, in fact, I thought it was kind of funny that this one particular review was like, getting all, you know, was like, why is this a bestseller? And it's like, because it's fun. It's exciting, you know, okay, that's fine. You don't like it, that's cool. But it's like, bestsellers are fun and easy reads. You know, it doesn't mean they're going to be literary masterpieces. You know? That doesn't, just because it's a bestseller is not to stand for, oh, this is so well written and so in-depth and stuff. Bestsellers usually are books, I mean, like, it's a 50-50 if they're going to be good, well-written books. And, like, literary masterpieces. Basically, bestsellers. But I enjoyed that. I don't have a lot to say on it, obviously, but I still liked it. I had a good time. And it is a trilogy, I think, but I decided not to continue with it. I mean, maybe if I ever remember and see the rest of the other books in the trilogy at the library, then maybe I'll get them. But so the last one was another audiobook, Last Night at the Telegraph Club. This one I heard from the channel supposedly fun. I always try to now, because of an episode of one of my favorite shows, Ghost Whisperer, was saying about how supposedly is not a word. So I always now make sure I correct and say supposedly. Supposedly fun. He recommended this book. So this is set in the 1950s. Our main character is this Chinese American girl, and I think she's Cantonese, if I remember correctly. And she discovers that she is gay. And she's really struggling because she knows that her best friend and her mom will not accept that. And this is also during the time of the Red Scare. And it turns out that her and her best friend were hanging out with this guy who was supposedly part of the Communist Party. And her mom, and also it turns out he was also being treated by her dad, who's a doctor. So her family gets in trouble for that, and her father is temporarily taken from, removed from his job because of that, or loses his job. So not only is she dealing with the fact that her sexual awakening, but she's also dealing with the fact that her parents have to be careful, because they are, we are right now worried about communism in the United States in the 1950s. So her mom is like warning her, is like, you need to be a perfect Chinese young lady, and her mom is constantly dressing her like a little girl, in my opinion, anyway. And she's dealing with keeping this secret, and she ends up falling in love with this one girl, and her and the girl end up discovering, she discovered the Telegraph Club, which is a hangout place for people that are gay, to a nightclub, because of course at this time it was even worse, and it was not even acceptable for people to be gay, and and this is their only sanctuary. But things get complicated because, her friends and her parents have needs and need her to, do things for them and spend time with them. So it kind of messes with her relationship with her best friend, although, in my opinion, her best friend was not that great. She's kind of a bitch. Very spoiled brat and all about me. And, I think she was the kind of person that she means well, and she cares about our main characters. I do not remember their names at the moment. But she's also, like I said, very self-centered. And a spoiled brat. And then her mom, I can understand her mom's concern, because she's afraid. She loves her daughter and wants to protect her, and she doesn't understand certain things, so she acts stupidly and acts unfair to her daughter. And unfortunately, a story like this there's no guarantee it's going to end happy, unfortunately. This was really great. I like the narrator, and I want to say, I think that the narrator of this book is the same narrator for Six Crimson Cranes, but I'm not sure on that. But I had a great time with this. It's a sad book, but I really enjoyed it. I really felt and connected with the main character. I wish I could remember her name. Not in the sense that, because my relationship with my parents is great. I don't have the issue of being gay and having to hide that from my parents or from my friends. And of course, I'm not a teenager anymore. But I can definitely connect with the whole, still kind of figuring yourself out and feeling shy and feeling overshadowed by people sometimes. But it was great. I really enjoyed that. Okay, so then so August. Let's get to August now. So this is when I started listening to getting nonfiction. So the first nonfiction, today I went to the bookstore that used the Roast Office Bookshop today, because, we were seeing what was going on for a Labor Day weekend. And unfortunately we missed the whole farmer's market. There was a farmer's market, and it usually happens in the mornings on Saturday. But I asked my dad if I could, he walks around, if I could go to the bookshop. So I did, and I actually almost bought another nonfiction about Titanic. So Titanic, A Survivor by Violet Jessup is a memoir of Violet Jessup's. She was a stewardess both on Titanic and on the Britannica. So obviously she survived the Titanic, and she survived the Britannica. And the editor of her memoir, she met him while she was a stewardess on a cruise ship. I don't know if he was actually on the cruise ship or not, but he said that she took real good care of his mother, and I'm assuming he was on there because he did talk to her about, and that was what I think inspired her to write this memoir. So now the Titanic stuff is only 2 chapters, but they're 2 long chapters. We mostly get her life growing up in, I think, was it Argentina? I cannot remember where she grew up, but she was Irish, but she didn't grow up in Ireland. her mom, I think, was a stewardess first. And when her dad died, she offered to take her mom's place on ships because they need the money. And her mom, of course, was getting too old. And funnily enough, her mom did not want her. Well, actually, it's not funny because it actually makes sense that her mom wouldn't want her to. Her mom and the guy she went to for the interview were not too keen, but for different reasons. Her mom was worried about her safety. I guess the reasons aren't that different. Like, the guy who hired her was reluctant because she was this young and beautiful woman, and he knew how people could be. But before that, she did work as a governess, and her former employer, also did not want her to do this job, but she notes that she believes that it might be because she didn't want to lose Violet as a governess to her children. So she talks a lot about what it's like working on a ship and how there are pros and cons to it. Like, she liked traveling the world, meeting all these interesting people, the family she forms, but also there were a lot of rude passengers. And it's funny that she said she preferred the American passengers because they weren't as rude to her. They were very nice and polite to her. But, she works for these people, essentially. She has to serve them, so they can get away with being rude to her, because they're like, you serve me, and you could get fired if I say a bad word about you. And there were some demanding passengers that had weird requests. And she did get harassed, and she did find herself in a bit of a love triangle, but the guy who ends up being the love of her life could not commit. He was this Australian guy. Unfortunately, he could not commit to her. Even when she visited him, eventually they never got married. She didn't marry anyone else. And she really talks about the hardships, how difficult it is to be a stewardess on a ship. So not only rude passengers, but also it's a difficult lifestyle. And obviously a dangerous one. She also talks about how she was a nurse during World War II, I think it was. It would be World War II, and how that's when she was on the Britannica, because it was like a hospital ship. So it's a good book for learning about the struggles and, being a stewardess on a ship. Like I said, it devotes 2 chapters to the experience of being on these 2 ships and how she survived and how terrifying it was. So it's a good to add to your collection if you're a Titanic fan, if you want to, well, not, I guess fan's not the right word, but if you're a Titanic enthusiast, it might be a good one to add to your list of books about Titanic, because it does, of course, like I said, there's 2 chapters, and it talks about life as a stewardess, not just on Titanic. So after that, I listened to A Long Way to a Small and Green Planet by Becky Chambers, and I heard a lot about this one. I think it's a good book and this is coming from someone who's not a big sci-fi reader, it's a good book for, like, beginner sci-fi. People don't like heavy science stories, and so, we have, is it Mary? It's not, I can't remember. I want to say Marianne, but I don't think it's Marianne. Where is it? Rosemary. Rose, our main character is Rosemary, or she starts out as our main character. And she's kind of seems to be on the, she has just woken up from being in a pod, being asleep. And she seems to be running from something, and we don't know what it is right away. And she is supposed to be a clerk on this ship called the Wayfarer. It's a ship mixed of aliens and humans, and they basically punch tunnels in space for people to cross to all the different planets and solar systems. And this is just quite an array of various different types of characters. There was really only one character that I didn't love, and that was Corbin, but I'm thinking maybe in the next book he might be a more likable character. It was a very character-driven story, and they're very wholesome, you know, but there is cursing. There's, which I think made it much more authentic, because that is part of our natural vocabulary, unfortunately. But it was just really fun being being on the Wayfarer and getting to know these different characters. There was one alien character that I think she was kind of bird-like creature that forms an attachment to Rosemary. They become friends, and then maybe a little bit more intimate. And she has a very interesting very alternative lifestyle. Like, she has her birth family, then she has the children she gives birth to, and then she has her feather family, which those are the people that she loves and she has a bond with. So I thought that was really interesting, and I like how this is a creative way to explore accepting people of different lifestyles and different cultures, and, you know, really adapting and being understanding and being open-minded to different types of lifestyles, different alternative lifestyles, different cultures. Like I said, it was very, like, warm, wholesome reading, and I was never worried about the characters. The stakes felt like they weren't very high in the story. Like, it felt like a Star Trek Next Generation episode. Like, you know, each chapter, you know, they would have conflict and then they resolved it. But I really had a good time with this. Like I said, it's great for starting out with sci-fi, because it's not really heavy on the science. And just very wholesome. Like I said, it does have curse words. Characters are cursing, and, you know, there is sex. But yeah, so anyway, after I listened to that, and I liked the narrator. The narrator was good. Then finally, I have another book to actually show you, and that is Firestarter. I read Firestarter by Stephen King. Since the new adaptation just came out, I figured I'd go ahead and read it. And so I bought this at, and I had, again, another situation where I had the mass market, but I decided I wanted better, you know, the larger copy. So I bought this one at BAM, and this was really fun and engaging. So you have our main character, Charlie, and she is a fire starter. And her dad, Andy, and mom, Vicky, when they were in college, they both participate in this government experiment. Let me see if it says what they're called. Oh, okay, so it's the shop. I can never remember what the government agency was called. They would give these people, 2 different groups of people, like, they would inject them with something, and one of the test groups, would have lot 6, which is this drug that would get into their system. And it turns out it gave them psychic powers. And they didn't know which group would have it, but it turns out that Vicky and Andy were part of the group that had the psychic powers. Vicky, I think I want to say she might have been telekinetic. And Andy could, like, push people. In other words, he could push people to think what he wants them to think. He can control what they think, what they see. Basically, it's mind read. It's, you know, mind control. And it turns out that they have a daughter, Charlie, who inherits the powers of a fire starter. And the government that experimented on them, the government they call it the shop, is hunting Charlie down because they find out they've been keeping tabs on this family and are trying to hunt her down. And so Charlie and Andy are on the run, and they've already killed Vicky for torturing information from her. And this was really fun, another thriller, exciting, you know. And what I love about King is he's really good at writing characters and really diving deep into who these people are. He did get help from his own daughter, Naomi, on how to portray this character. And together they did a great job with Charlie's character. They made it relatable, very sweet and understandable, you know, because, I mean, imagine if you had this power as a little kid, and then what if you lost your temper when your parents said, no, you can't have something? Like, and that one, you find that in her past, she's set her hair on fire, she burned up her teddy bear, she almost burned her mom, because she lost her temper. And it's scary. It's scary for the child and the parents. And I feel very, I feel for them. And I also really liked Andy and Charlie's relationship. It was very sweet and very endearing. They also had an interesting character in, what is his name? Rainbird. And, he was this guy who was very smart. He was kind of the muscle, but he was also a government agent, so he wasn't just a dumb brute, as the cliche is for the muscle characters. And he was very interesting. It's a little creepy, but he was also very creepy. Like, my opinion, he was one of those characters where, my opinion changed throughout the book on my feelings for him, for him as a character. And I just, this was really fun, and, I really, and I thought the power was kind of cool. And I like how it had it where Charlie kind of, like, she was terrified, but she also admits that she kind of enjoyed using her power. She liked it. And that's the scariest thing of all for her. But yeah, this was really great. And it does have, of course, the elements that a lot of people complain about with Stephen King books. There's the language. There's characters that are racist. There's, but it's still, it's, for me, it's just King's stories are very engaging, and, I won't read all of his work, but I had a good time with this one. Okay, so next is 2 library books, which I also did reviews for. Family Chow by Lan Samantha Chang and The Matrix by Lauren Groff. I'm not going to say a lot about those, but I really enjoyed, like, The Family Chow was a retelling of Brothers Karamazov. It's a very dark story. It's basically these 3 brothers. Their dad is a narcissist. He's an immigrant. He's an immigrant from China. He's a narcissist, and he runs this restaurant called the Family Chow. It's Americanized Chinese food. It's really good, very popular, but no one likes Leo Chang as a person. And he ends up one Christmas, after a Christmas party, he ends up murdered. And his oldest son, William Dagu Chang is the number 1 suspect. And so the second part is all about the trial and deciding if he killed his father. And it's all about how messed up this family is and these kids. Like, the mom left her husband because she went to become a nun because she couldn't handle it anymore, and there was one thing that really was too much for her, and she finally left him, but she still asks, William to forgive his father, but he cannot bring himself to do that. Leo ruined his relationship with his sons. Like I said, it very much follows the Brothers Karamazov, even though I didn't finish that book. And I just think it was really good, but I can understand where not everybody would love it. And there are some cliche elements to what people assume Chinese people are like. And it's just, and almost no one, with the exception of James, are likable. All these characters are assholes. Well, and Winnie's a likable character too. She's really sweet, but she's almost too good. She's almost saintly. And then the 2, Catherine and Brenda, are likable, but, they can be annoying. Like, Catherine has this obsession with this family, although, as I said in the review, I think it comes from a place of feeling guilty that she did not suffer the way other Chinese people did. She was spoiled by being Americanized. I could be off on that. I could be totally wrong, but that's my theory. And, it was really good. It was well written. It is a bit, it's a very dark story, but it's really great. And then The Matrix is the story of this woman who's actually an actual historical figure that wrote poems. But she was, there's a lot of rumors and speculation about who she really was. And this kind of does its own spin on that story. She is, I don't know why I can't think of her name, but she is banished because she's not considered as pretty, and she's, I think, a bastard. She is sent to an abbey to become a sub-prioress, and that is the last thing she wants. So she ends up writing these poems, hoping that this will get the attention of the palace and the queen and will get her out of there. But it doesn't work, and she is stuck there. But she decides, and it is about her taking full advantage and embracing her new destiny, even though she's trapped there, and finding her place and becoming a mother to these girls, these young women, and protecting them. And it was definitely a very interesting character-driven story, although the one action scene was a bit of a letdown. But this is not an action book. This is not, I do realize that this is very much a story about this woman eventually becoming an abbess in this abbey. So I know it's not an action book. It's not a thriller. It's supposed to be an exciting book. It's more this woman's journey of self-discovery and embracing this lifestyle. And it's really good. Like I said, I did reviews for both those books in the same review, so I'm not going to talk too much about them. But I enjoyed it. Okay, and then we have another, so then I decided to go ahead and read The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. And, this was a story about this young woman, this young thief, Luli Nazari. She is known as the Midnight Merchant. She collects magical objects with jinn magic and sells them to the highest bidder. And after she accidentally, not realizing, saves the prince from a jinn who thinks he's a hunter, because in this world, jinn are being hunted down and they were cast out a long time ago by the humans because they got too powerful. So now there are jinn hunters, and Luli saves the prince. Is one of those, or the oldest son is a jinn hunter, and the prince ends up, and it's actually the younger prince who she saves, not realizing it. And she is rewarded by the Sultan when he sends her on a mission to retrieve this powerful lamp that contains a jinn that is powerful enough to wipe out all the jinn if they control him. So she, along with her bodyguard, who happens to be a jinn who protected her, Qadir, the prince, although it's supposed to be the oldest prince, but he decides to weasel out of it and uses the disguise to send his brother instead, his younger brother. And it doesn't say, I can't remember. They, along with one of the 40 thieves, go on this mission to find the magic lamp. This is a travel and quest story. It does seem a little repetitive at times because they're traveling through the desert, but it is changed when they run into various different characters. There's a hint of romance, a potential love interest for Luli, but it doesn't, unfortunately, it's unable to go anywhere because something happens. Like she's in love with one of she is infatuated with one of the hunters who actually turns out to be a decent guy in her eyes. But then, like I said, something happens to him. And, it's really a friendship story about these 4 companions becoming actually friends and understanding each other. I really like that we got to explore Jinn magic. That was really fun. Like, I like all the different, like, cultures. You know, the closest I've come to learning about the Jinn is there was a supernatural episode with Jinn. Were actually 2, and then, of course, Aladdin. You know, I'm assuming that Genie was based on Jinn. And there was a lot of action scenes. The ending is the climax is very exciting and action-packed. The bad guy did feel, the one who ended up being the bad guy was a little too cliche. But still, you know, still worked. I really liked Quadir's character. I like how the 2 badass characters who were, you know, criminals were the female characters. And I like how, you know, there is a hint of romance, but they didn't get as, like, they weren't like, I need a man to help me. But this was a great first book in a trilogy. I cannot wait to see when the author writes the next one. So then I ended up being motivated to finalist To the City of Brass, an audiobook, which is a similar story, except for it's about Jinn, and it's not a quest story like our main character, she is part Jinn, and she starts out as human. She's a master, a con artist, and, she's discovered by one particular Jinn, Dara, that she might have Jinn blood in her. So he's forced to take her to the City of Brass, where he's an outlaw. And, meanwhile, the prince, the Sultan of the Jinn, his son, the prince, is kind of caught between helping these repressed Jinn and staying loyal to the crown. Or the throne, I guess. And he's kind of caught in the middle of this war between these 2 groups of people. The royal family and then the repressed group. So I like how it really looked at that kind of issue of people in power oppressing the one group and prejudice. I liked how badass our main character was at first. She was feisty, she fought back, but then once she starts developing feelings for Dara, she kind of gets a little, like, she's a lot more of a disappointing character. And once again, I love learning about the world of the Jinn and the culture, and all that kind of stuff was always really cool. That's why I decided to listen to that one, because of Stardust Thief. And, so that was really fun to get into, and I had a good time. The narrator was great. I feel bad, I don't have a lot to say about narrators. There's never been a narrator that I didn't like. Well, I shouldn't say that. There was the narrator of the H.P. Lovecraft 7 stories was a disappointment. Most of the narrators that was really good. I could understand them. You know, if it was fiction, they did a good job at creating characters. Although, I also gotta admit, I didn't absolutely love the older Lord of the Rings audiobooks. That's why I would like to eventually buy the other ones. With Andy Serkis as the narrator. Okay, so next I have 3 more books to go. And actually, I was going to film one more video, but, you know, I gotta eat lunch. And it's almost 4 o'clock. And I still haven't touched my sandwich and chips. So I'm not going to be hungry for dinner. So we have March. So everyone knows Little Women. It's a classic story about the March sisters during the Civil War, living in Massachusetts and their struggles and growing up, and, you know, Jo is a tomboy and doesn't want to get married. You know, Meg and Amy are struggling with the fact that they're not rich. Amy has dreams of becoming, you know, an artist, but she has to, you know, she has to get married first, and, you know, and Beth gets scarlet fever, and but this is the story of Mr. March during his time on the battlefield, and it is a much more adult story because it's, you know, it's a war, and you're dealing with a lot of issues like slavery and what was going on during the Civil War, and how it was the South versus the North, and how the North were trying to get rid of slavery, and the South were like, we need our slaves. And it's, again, a very dark, more mature story. And again, I think I did a review for this one as well. Yeah, because it was a library book. And it was just really interesting getting this perspective of, like, I didn't DNFing Little Women, and I just prefer the two adaptations I've seen. But this one was, I actually really enjoyed this. I think because it was more of an adult story, and I read Little Women in my later years, like either when I was late teens or early 20s, and I think that ruined the appeal for me because I was already mature and knew what I liked. And this one wasn't as saccharine or sentimental. I mean, it has a sentimental aspect to it because, of course, Mr. March has a very strong moral compass. He's a man of God, and he tries to preach the word of God and help the black slaves because he wants them to get an education. He wants to help them, and he believes that they should be set free. But he's fighting a losing battle, unfortunately. And, of course, we know that eventually, you know, the black slaves are set free. And, thanks to Lincoln. And it was just such a, you know, a very touching story. And we got to see more of a Marmee, too. Like, it's hinted, we see when he met her. We go back and forth between the past and the present. And, you know, she hinted at her what she was like when she was a young woman, now if she could relate to Joe, but we don't really see it until this book. So like I said, I expand a lot more on that in my review, so I'm going to stop there with that. But it was a really great book, and again, just like the other Bennett sister and Longbourn, it's a great compliment to it's what it was originally inspired by. So that's March by Geraldine Brooks. Okay, and then the last two books were nonfiction. So first, George Washington's Secret Six. So if you are familiar with AMC's Turn, Washington Spies, I don't think this wasn't the book that inspired that show is based on, but it's about the same thing. How George Washington realized he needed to create the spy ring to win the war. And because of that, we did win. They were involved in a lot. It had a rough start. They were involved in the Benedict Arnold situation. And they were a reason he got caught. And it was really cool learning about the spy ring and seeing them. And it was also very intense because you didn't know if they were caught. I mean, we know what happens in the end of the war, but we don't know which ones of these guys survived. And sadly, there's only one of them. The guy who first got sent as a spy, unfortunately, though, he got caught and was hanged. But we don't know about the other guys because they didn't want anyone to know. They do not get any credit because they wanted to keep it secret. And George Washington himself did not know every single member because some of them requested he not know because of the dangerousness of the situation. And I think it was a really great read to pair with Turn, the show Turn. I tried to watch it, but unfortunately I had to pay for it if I wanted to because it's not on the air anymore. Which is a little disappointing, but that's how it is. And I did decide to put on my Amazon wish list. But it was a really great. It was really cool. And it was a very easy read. It was not a super big book. It wasn't like those huge biographies. But it covered a lot, but it probably didn't dive deep enough. But it was really, and it talks about the one member that was a female, Agent 355, who they don't know who she is, but there's a strong belief that that Anna Strong this one woman, that she might have been Agent 355. And I think the show Turn goes with that. Now, I have not read the book that Turn is based off of, because this is not it. I don't think. But, they did go with that in that show, with Anna Strong. So, but for this one, they just leave. They say, we don't know, we suspect it might be her, but we're not sure. But this was really great if you're interested. It's a good starting place if you're interested in this particular subject. Okay, so the last book was Everybody Was So Young by Amanda Valley. So, most people know all about Ernest Hemingway, the Fitzgeralds, Zelda and Scott Fitzgerald, which I was originally reading the Zelda Fitzgerald biography, Her Voice in Paradise, but I decided I'm going to return to the library. Not that I'm not liking it, but it's a long book, so I'd rather just buy it. It's another biography, and it's my growing collection. And we know about Picasso and Cole Porter, but we do not know about the Murphys. This was a couple, Gerald and Sarah Murphy. Gerald was this artist. He liked how things work. That's what he would paint is how things work. He painted the inside of a watch, the wirings of a watch, the mechanics of a watch. He painted a lot of interesting. I don't remember. Pear and Wasp was, I think, one of his paintings too. I don't know if there's a. I cannot think if there's a wasp there. I don't think there's an actual wasp in the picture. Or no, it was actually Pear and something else, and then there was a picture called Wasp. There's a portrait called Wasp. And then Sarah was a socialite. And I think like Zelda, she could do a lot of stuff. And this was their biography. They were kind of the parents of this group of artists. Although they had a very complicated relationship with both Hemingway and Fitzgerald. And Gerald's sexuality was also kind of up for debate, I think. And both Picasso and I think Fitzgerald too, and Hemingway were all in love with Sarah. And, of course, Ernest did not like Gerald. He was friends with him, but he didn't like him. And they weren't as messed up as the rest of the group of these other people. They didn't have as many issues, like, as a couple. I mean, they did, but, they weren't as toxic. Like, especially as the Fitzgeralds. But it was really, fun to read about them. But it was very detailed, which is both, I think, a good and a bad thing, because it means that this is a very long biography, and there probably were details that weren't necessarily important. But that's up to the person who wrote the biography, of course. So it's a really long book, but it really, really told you, dive deep in this thing with this couple, and you want to be friends with them, want to be part of their lives. They were really charming and just fun to be around, and it doesn't just show the flashy side of the 1920s, it shows everything of the 1920s, and it just felt like another historical time period. It wasn't just about the roaring 20s. They had their dark periods. They had a lot of these issues. They did regular day activities that we do today. But it was obviously different. There were differences. And it's just really fun to dive deep into the lives of the Murphys and get to know them as a couple and see their lives unfold and see their complicated relationships with these other artists. Although they loved them, but there was also frustrations. They were like children. They love when you love your children, but you also get frustrated with them and angry at them. And there were times that some of them would be inspired by this couple, with their loyal friends and cared about them and would throw these great parties. And Fitzgerald and Picasso and Hemingway were inspired by them in their own work, but sometimes if it made them look bad, the Murphys weren't too appreciative of that all the time. Especially if it wasn't just that it made them look bad, it also was not the most accurate. Like, they were kind of partially inspired the divers in Tender's the Night. I think, is it Tender's This Night or This Side of Paradise? I always get those two stories mixed up. And Picasso in my opinion, crossed the line because he would draw these naked pictures of Sarah. You know, paint these sketches of her where she's naked, but Sarah was a bit of a flirt at times. But it was really fun. Like I said, I wanted to be part of their circle. So it was a bit long, but it was still, like, biographies most of the time are pretty long. But yeah, it was great. It was good. I enjoyed it. You know, it was kind of cool to see this other group of people that's part of, you know, not just learning about the ones that are super famous, but also the ones, you know, because I admit, I didn't know anything about the Murphys. I didn't know who Gerald Murphy was. It's almost like history forgot him, I feel like. But Amanda Valley brought him back. So anyway, so that's what I read for July and August. I'm still listening to the Hamilton biography, but it has inspired me to get some other nonfiction works. Like, I just bought a Jefferson, which I don't know if that's it's short. It's a different. It's not the same one I've seen lately, but it's another kind of. I don't know if it's considered a biography. I'll have to look at it. But there is another one out there that I've seen, that I love to get. Because you can listen to Hamilton, how he brings the worst in people like Jefferson and Adams. It makes me intrigued to learn more about these two. And I did. You guys know I had the David McCullough biography on Adams, but I got rid of it because it was a borrowed copy from my brother-in-law. So, and I think I would rather have a paperback copy of it if I ever buy it again. So I'm on the lookout for that one. Fortunately, they only have the hardback one at the roast office. So, and that means it's a little. And even though most of the things in the vault are expensive, they had a different price because I think I had 3 copies in one bind up, which I don't know why. I don't know why they just didn't put them as separate, but maybe they were just trying to get rid of them and not have so many. But anyway, so how is it? I hope your reading in July and August went well. And I hope your readings continue to go well. Would love to know what you are currently reading right now. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up, and I hope you understood it, because I know I kind of got fast in my speaking throughout halfway through, because then I realized what time it was, well past lunchtime. But anyway, if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you want to, and click the bell icon if you want to be updated when I post new videos. And I hope you are enjoying your reading, and I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye!